up, we always had a snack when we came home from school. And one snack that we had that was not quite as common as we always wished it would be was lollipops. Surprisingly enough, these lollipops are made with bread dough, and I need bread, so today I'm gonna make bread and lollipops. The recipe we always used called for sugar, but honey is a lot better. It makes the bread a lot softer, so I always use honey. I also always use lard. Or if you don't have lard, just use butter. We're going to add quite a bit of salt and cream all of that together, then add your yeast. And yes, it's going to take quite a bit of yeast. The general rule in bread is 1 tablespoon of yeast per loaf of bread. I always like to mix that together, then you're gonna add your lukewarm water to that. Just mix that together a little bit. And Mom would usually make this on bread making days. If she thought she had a little bit of extra bread dough, she'd make like 1 for each of us. Now we're gonna start adding flour, and I didn't take my flour out of the bag, so we're measuring it right out of the bag. Just add like half of it at first. And a fun fact about me that I don't know if you guys knew or not, but I used to be an Amish school teacher from the time I was 15 to the time I was 18 when I left the Amish. I left the Amish 8 days after my school term ended. Our schools start in the last week in August and go until the first week in April with no vacations except for the day of Thanksgiving, the day of Christmas, and January 6th, which they call Old Christmas, and they fast on that day. Those are the only days they have off unless there's a funeral in the community. Just mix half of that flour in until the dough seems smooth and kind of elastic like this. Then we're going to add the other half as well. And one of my favorite things about bread making days when I was like 2 years or older was always kneading the bread dough down, because Mom would always let us do that. She also sometimes let us knead the bread dough because apparently the bread is nicer the more you knead it, and we loved kneading it, so we would always knead it tirelessly for a long time, which meant the bread was nice and soft. Versus adults who just get it done as quickly as possible. You're gonna end up kneading the last of that flour in. I always just use one hand and do this bowl turning method that my mom taught me. Something that my mom was very strict about when she taught us how to knead dough was only use one hand. If we use 2 hands, we got a good solid scolding. Once you have that all kneaded in, we're going to grease our bowl, and I'm just going to use some lard. And at home, we always made our own lard from our homegrown pigs. When you butcher them, just trim off the fat and boil it down until it turns into lard. Then you have to skim off all of the little dirt things. They have a name, but I can't remember what it is in English right now. We used to like to eat those. Now we're going to cover this. And if you guys are wanting the towel like that, it's going to be for sale soon. Just going to cover it and let it rise until it's double in size. Now once your dough has double in size, we're going to knead it down. And we're going to cover it again and let it rise again until it's double in size. If it has doubled in size again, I'm going to punch it down again. Mom used to spoil us, and she'd set her timer, which was a manual timer, not a battery one. And once the timer went off, we were allowed to knead this down. I remember one time when I was like 3 or 4 years old, she told us we couldn't. She went to take a nap, and when the timer went off, we decided to go knead it down. And we kneaded it down a little too long and a little too hard, and Mom was not happy with us when she woke up because we knew better. We're gonna cover it and let it rise one more time until it's double in size. Dough is done rising for the last time. Punch it down a little, and I'm gonna make 1 big loaf. This dough is enough to make 2 regular sized loaves of bread. I'm just gonna make 1 big loaf, and then I'm gonna make the rest into little lollipops. You want to grease the pan that you're going to use for your bread. I'm also going to grease the bottom of the pan of what I'm going to use for my lollipops. And you can also just use a regular cake pan for this. It's just the smallest I had, besides an 8x8, and I didn't want to use an 8x8, so I decided to just use this. I'm going to get my bread out first. Just make sure you get all the air bubbles out, and the best way to do that is to spank it. Mom also used to let us do that as little kids, and we loved it. Once you have all the air bubbles out, shape it into a loaf and then put it into a loaf pan. And then to keep the air bubbles from forming while you're baking it, just punch holes in it with a fork. Like that. We're going to set it aside, and we're going to make our lollipops. We're going to need some heavy whipping cream. We're going to put that out into a little bowl or something. And I'm using a 1/4 cup of the heavy whipping cream for this pan. If you use an 8x8, I'd recommend using 1/2 cup, and then you're going to need the same amount of brown sugar or maple syrup that you have cream. Just mix that together really well. If you're using brown sugar, it doesn't have to dissolve, but you want to make sure it's mixed. And we're going to pour it into our pan. And now it's time to form these. So you basically just make tiny little buns, and we're going to put it into that brown sugar or maple syrup and cream mixture. And now we just cover both of those things and set them in a warm place so they can rise. These need to rise for about 15 minutes. The loaf of bread needs to rise until it domes up a little bit. Now as soon as those things are done rising, we're going to stick them into the oven. These are done, and I think this is done too, so I'm just gonna put them both in the oven. I just pulled these both out of the oven. I pulled this out a little while before I pulled this one out. This is my husband. He's gobbling some stuff up behind me. I'm gonna take the loaf of bread out of the pan right away, put it on this rack. I'm gonna take this wet towel and put it over the loaf of bread so it gets nice and soft on the top, because I don't like a hard crust. And these lollipops are best if you eat them while they're still warm, so I'm gonna take one out right away. And they have that caramel sauce on the bottom. Oh my gosh, let's take a bite and make sure they're good. They're also still steaming. Oh yes, this is so delicious. This was always the biggest highlight coming home from school. If mom had a bread baking day, you'd walk in, the kitchen smelled like heaven, and then you had these to snack on. Just top tier life. And I'm not even gonna cut into the bread because I can taste it here, and it's delicious. It's gonna be nice and soft. So for these, I don't have a specific recipe in the cookbook, so if you wanna make it, just use 1/4 cup of cream and 1/4 cup of brown sugar or maple syrup. Mix it together and put it into the bottom of a loaf pan, or if you're using an 8x8, use twice as much stuff. And then just put your dinner roll sized bread pieces in there. Let it rise for about 15 to 20 minutes and bake it at 350 for about 15 to 20 minutes or until they're just light brown like this on top. And for the bread dough recipe that I use, it's in my Amish cookbook on page 29 under simple white bread. And my Amish cookbook is only available on my website, socialsbylavina.com, which is in my caption, or you can go to the profile, or you can just type it into your browser. Enjoy!